Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Fall 2022 installment of our Community Conversation Series. I'm Dr. Skinner Osei, an assistant professor and the BSW program coordinator in the Phyllis and Harvey Sandler School of Social Work, housed within the College of Social Work and Criminal Justice here at Florida Atlantic University. The community that is gathered here tonight is comprised of students, faculty, staff, administrators, special guests, campus partners, and engaged community members. We are grateful that you have chosen to spend part of your evening with us. Our college started this conversation series as a space to learn, discuss, and explore issues affecting our local communities, with a focus on where the professions of social work and criminal justice intersect. The College of Social Work and Criminal Justice is uniquely positioned to host these impactful conversations because of our vision, which is to strive for a more just, resilient, and equitable society that honors the dignity and worth of every person across our one human race. This is why all of us are here tonight. A few housekeeping notes before we get started. First, we intend for this to be a conversation, and we want to hear from you. Please post your questions for our panelists in the chat box, and we will get to as many as we can during the Q&A. The next item is regarding an important survey we will share just before the Q&A. It's important for two main reasons. Number one, your feedback helps us keep future events like this one meaningful for you. And number two, if you are a licensed mental health professional or nurse and earning a CEU credit for your attendance, we will need your survey response to generate your CEU certificate, which you can expect to receive via email within 10 business days. Also, to save a bit of time, I invite you to read the full bios and expertise for our speakers, which were included in the reminder email you should have received earlier today. It is now my pleasure to introduce our moderator for tonight's conversation, Mr. Sean Backer. Sean recently retired as Deputy Chief of Police for the Coral Springs Police Department after 25 years in law enforcement and is now a full-time instructor here at FAU. I would like to thank him and each of our panelists for their tremendous service to our communities and within our classrooms and for lending their perspectives to all of us tonight. Sean, please take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Osei. I appreciate the warm welcome. I want to echo your gratitude towards tonight's panelists, which I will briefly introduce to everybody right now. Joining us from the Sandler School of Social Work, we have Dr. Marsha Lee Adam, who is a former school social worker and current instructor here at Florida Atlantic University. We also have with us from the Coral Springs Police Department, Sergeant William Kaplis, who's in charge of the Community Involvement Unit. Also joining us is Officer James Bostic, the School Resource Officer at Coral Springs High School, and Officer Timothy Burton, the School Resource Officer at Coral Glades High School. As Dr. Osei mentioned, I recently retired as Deputy Chief from the Coral Springs Police Department, so I go way back with the three gentlemen from Coral Springs and happy to have them here with me today as panelists. I'm also incredibly grateful to have recently met Dr. Adam and to now be her fellow faculty member here at the College of Social Work and Criminal Justice. Let's dive into today's community conversation. The reason we're here today is to discuss the perception of increased violence, frequent substance use, and waning mental health among our youth. These evolving challenges are requiring social workers and SROs to take a more frontline approach and to assess other contributing factors beyond COVID-19, such as local and state policies, social media influence, and circumstances at home. This will be an eye-opening discussion with seasoned SROs and school social workers as they share their insider perspective and their top insights for families. I want to go over the format for today's conversation briefly. I'm going to allow each panelist to introduce themselves and give a summation of their experience. And then we're going to go through the panelist questions and discussion. As Dr. Osei mentioned, we do encourage this to be conversationalist in nature, so we expect everybody to post their questions to the chat room. We will have a question and answer session at the end of the event, in which we will try to cover as many of those questions as possible. And now it's my honor to introduce these panelists And I would like to start by introducing Dr. Marshall A. Adam.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Marshallie Adam, a visiting instructor with the School of Social Work at FAU. Previously, I was a school therapist and school social worker with Broward Schools.
Thank you, Dr. Adam. Next, I'd like to introduce Sergeant Bill Kaplis.
Good evening. I've been with the Coral Springs Police Department since 2000. For the years from 2015 to 2020, I was the supervisor of the Youth Liaison Unit, and I currently run our Community Outreach, Crime Prevention, Community Involvement Unit.
Thank you. Next up, I'd like to introduce Officer James Bostic.
Hi, everyone. My name is James Bostic. I've been with Coral Springs Police Department for going on 16 years. I've been in the Coral Springs High School SRO for going on 4 years. And I'm glad to be here.
Thank you, James. And last but certainly not least, Officer Tim Burton.
Hi, Tim Burton, Coral Springs Police Department. I've been with the department for 16 years. Currently the school resource officer at Coral Glades High School for 5 years.
Thank you, Tim. I'd like to start off the discussion by going into depth about the roles that each of you play in your current assignments. And I'd like to start with Dr. Adam. Dr. Adam, could you explain for the group here today, what are the responsibilities of a social worker and how are your roles similar or different from the school resource officers, and maybe touch on how you collaborate with them?
So a typical day for a school social worker is different. Every day is a new adventure. But school social workers are often providing mental health assessments, behavior support, education support, referrals to families, resources to individuals that are in the school, training staff and faculty on resources and services available for the students and their families. One of the resources is our school resource officers. And we look for our school resource officers, not only for the community may believe only for school violence issues. No, it's not only for school violence issues, but it has to do with also resources in community, connecting students and families with other support services in the communities to strengthen their ability to have academic success in all areas. So on a day-to-day basis, we're working as a collaborative team to promote student success and safety.
Thank you, Dr. Adam. And ironically, I think that everything you said is probably not the perception that folks have of an SRO, and we'll get into their roles and you know why that perception or how that perception came to be. Officer Bostic, the next question's for you. Can you describe for the group what are the responsibilities of a school resource officer?
Well, one of our main responsibilities at the school is to try our best to keep the school, the faculty, the staff, and the students safe from any outside intruders. But we also assist students and staff with who are victims of crime and victims of abuse on school campus. And we also act as counselors to juveniles. And one other thing, we also we try and educate the juveniles who are interested in law enforcement, try to teach them the letter of the law as much as possible. So we're just trying to always be there for anybody who needs us at the school.
Right. Officer Burton, you heard Officer Bostic's explanation and Dr. Adam. How are these roles of SRO and social work similar, and how do they differ in day-to-day for you?
We're similar in the fact that, you know, we do wear a lot of hats as police officers. One thing is that we're mentors, we're problem solvers, we're mandated reporters, and so are the social workers. If the social worker hears a problem that needs police attention, they'll bring it to our attention, and then, you know, we'll take it from a law enforcement aspect. How do we differ? there's things that I do that the social worker wouldn't do at school, like Officer Bostic mentioned. We provide the safety, the security. We write the reports, make arrests if we have to, and those are some things that the social workers, they don't get involved in that.
Right. I know no one's really touched on, and maybe Timmy, you could just talk on the collaboration between yourself and maybe the social workers as it relates to possibly Baker Acts with students.
Yeah, there's two main things that I really work with my social worker with. The first thing being the Baker Act. The student will be talking to the social worker. Student may be having a bad day. They may want to, hurt themselves right then and there, or maybe in the future, or sometime, in the past, but it has to be close to the time when they're talking to the social worker. The social worker will come and get my attention. They'll tell me, hey, Officer Burton, we have an issue in my office, and then I'll go handle it. The second thing is, as far as being a mandated reporter, a lot of kids will like to just talk away to the social worker and talk about maybe past traumatic experiences they've had. For example, we'll say they had a sexual experience that was, that somebody broke the law. The social worker will get my attention, relay me the information, and then we'll work together on solving the issue.
All right, it's great. Dr. Adam, I'd like to throw it back to you. Can you explain, I know you mentioned it briefly in the beginning when you were discussing your role, but could you go into more detail about how more specifically you collaborate with the school resource officers?
So as Officer Burton mentioned, there are opportunities for us to collaborate as a team when it comes to mental health assessments. There's different mental health assessments in the schools. So, most recently, there's been a lot of behavior threat assessments. So the officers are assisting school social workers and the assessment team with those assessments. But oftentimes we have maybe parent meetings or meetings among peers that could be conflictual, that causes issues. And when the SRO is present, there's more, there's a sense of collaboration and teammate. And so they're able to listen to different perspectives. So not just the social work coming from a trauma-informed care lens or mental health lens, but also what are the rules and regulations? What does the law says about their peer conflict or family conflict? And so sometimes issues in the community come to school. Oftentimes issues in the community spill over into the school, or school issues go into the community. So collaborating with the SRO on those issues can lessen the increase or the spiraling of a small issue now becomes a community fight or a community argument. So having all of our ears is very important to the student success and the school safety.
So Officer Bostic, as we talk about these issues of violence and mental issues and things that are taking place at the school, how are the SROs part of the solution for addressing some of these trends?
Well, from my point of view, per the agreement that the school board has with the police department, a lot of times our hands are tied on what we can and what we cannot do at the schools. So whenever a kid have an issue and it goes to the social worker or another teacher or a principal or whatever, we can assist them from that standpoint. But the solution part of it, it's being able to know what's really going on with the kid away from the school, and which myself or the social worker can't really get that until a kid come to the office with the issue. So right now, for me, I haven't found a solution. I don't know a solution that can really help. Maybe the social worker at my school, when I get back, I can talk to her. How can I help her with the final solution? But as of right now, we're always in the back end of it. And like I say, our hands are pretty much tied from that standpoint.
You find yourself acting in a very reactionary manner as opposed to proactively seeking out these issues is what I hear you saying.
Yes, because one thing about it is that, some schools don't really like police officers or the SROs getting involved with the students as there is something going on, so, but if a kid walks up to me and want to have a conversation, I have a conversation with them, try to educate them or try to help them with whatever they need.
All right. And those are good objectives to have with trying to help the students out. Officer Burton, obviously in your school, you've got social workers and you're the SRO there. What do you see are the benefits to working collaboratively with the social workers to tackle these issues?
Well, I think working as a team is key. I can share some ideas with the social worker to solve the problem. She can do the same with me. And it really helps out. Some of these kids that, come across either, my desk or the social worker's desk have some major problems, and they're looking for help. And, there's certain people they trust, it either might be me, the social worker, the guidance counselor. And, it's really good when everybody can come together and provide that student with the help and the resources that they need.
Excellent. Sergeant Kaplis, I have a question for you. We've been talking about stuff in the schools, and there's another component to the interaction between the schools and social work in our community, and that's the community outreach that takes place from your unit. But also, you mentioned having supervised the school resource officer program. So perception is sometimes that, if you have an officer there and they're called to a problem at the school, that they're basically just going to give you a book answer and make arrests or arrest kids. You've got some data for us. How often do the school resource officers, at least for the Coral Springs Police Department, how often are they making arrests on campus?
Just to break it down, in the city of Coral Springs, we have 19 public schools. They're made up of elementary, middle, and high schools. And then we have a combination of 10 other charter and private schools. We have 4 high schools in our city, one of which is our charter school. I pulled data from 2018, 2019, and 2021. We have close to 2,000 calls at each school per year. And the numbers show that it's in 2018, we had 2.12% of those calls resulted in arrests. In 2019, it was 2.18. And then in this year, 2021, last year was 2.26. So the calls to service and the activities that the SROs are interacting with kids are not leading to a lot of arrests whatsoever. What the SROs are doing in the school is we have a lot of educational programming where we start all the way from kindergarten, where we have our Safety Town program for traffic safety, bike safety, walk safety, as well as some other important lessons on stranger danger. We then have an educational course that we put on for all 5th graders in our city, which is our gang resistance and drug education. We push on into the middle schools where we continue to work with the principals, the social workers. We've done public service announcements for think before you post, vaping, sexting, whatever the current issues are. And then in the high schools, we still interact and have programming for drive safe and tobacco awareness.
So it doesn't sound like the primary objective is to be initiating a lot of arrests out of the schools. Sounds like you're more part of the school culture and trying to fix the problems.
You're always trying to work and educate. Yeah. And then the unit, as you mentioned before, that I've moved into is the community involvement unit. And what we do is we focus our efforts on community outreach and crime prevention, public safety education, and special needs assistance. Some of the things we do for outreach is we have our summer youth program, which is a 6-week summer camp for elementary to middle school kids. We wrapped up this summer. We had 97 kids in our camp. What it is, it's a free summer camp. The kids receive enrichment activities that consist of CPR. We get them vision checkups. They get free glasses if needed. They get dental checkups. We actually familiarize them with the different units in the police department, whether it be dispatch, SWAT, motor officers. Each camper leaves the camp with a backpack filled with school supplies, uniforms, and sneakers. Our main goal there is to keep connected with the kids during the summer, keep them fed. All our kids are from the underserved communities, and get them all prepared, ready to go back and have a successful school year. We also have picnic and sports clubs, which runs now monthly. We previously ran it weekly to keep connected with the kids in those neighborhoods, where we provide them meals and play games with them for a couple hours on a Wednesday night. And where we really network with the social workers is they give us the insight on the kids who are most in need of our programming. They help us with the enrollment for the summer youth program. They also assist us with the names for our angel tree, which is a program where we provide over 200 Christmas angels with gifts, as well as their siblings. They also help us get together 24 to 30 kids per year for our Shop with the Cop events, and walk to school, bike to school days as well. They help us out with any kids that are in need for a bike. So we have a very good rapport with the social workers and communication, and it's all about educating and helping the kids succeed.
That's fantastic, Sergeant Kaplis. I know that's where Dr. Osei, has done some work with you all in the youth summer camp there. So that's fabulous, fabulous work. I would like to change gears here for a minute here. We've got some, really experienced folks as it relates to school safety. And, in this post-Marjory Stoneman Douglas era, living in South Florida, school safety and the threats and the social media threats that take place seem like almost daily down here are obviously at the forefront of everybody's mind. And one of the things that came out of the Marjory Stoneman Douglas Act after that horrific tragedy was this emphasis on behavioral threat assessments. And I'd like to talk a little bit about what they are and the team that completes these. So Officer Burton, could you explain for the group exactly what is a behavioral threat assessment?
Sure. I'll get notified by my assistant principal at school that there's been some type of threat made, whether it's to the school itself or a student or any member of the school. A threat assessment team will gather. Usually it's the vice principal, the social worker, myself, and the guidance counselor. The assistant principal, social worker, guidance counselor will interview the student and ask questions. I just kind of stand by and listen. And then when the interview is over, we as a team will decide what level of threat that it's perceived to be from the student. I will give you an example. So a couple months ago, it came across my desk that one of my students took a picture with a handgun. I got the team together. We called that student down. We interviewed the student. He gave us his story. And then after we were done, I write a threat assessment report. And then there's also 3 officers at the Coral Springs Police Department, a sergeant and 2 officers who deal with only only threats. I made a phone call to them, and they can further investigate the picture with the gun. Whose gun was it? Why did he take the picture? And those officers will actually provide the people involved with maybe some resources that they need. Are you taking the proper precautions at your home of safe gun keeping? Do you keep the gun in the safe? Where can you buy a safe if you do have the gun? So there's a lot of things that go into it, but that was just one example that was pretty successful and solved using the behavior threat assessment.
Yeah, in my time there, obviously I saw what you guys would do with those, and they were tremendous. Though, but I'd like to allow Dr. Adam to maybe give a little bit of her perspective on you talked about what the police can do after. Dr. Adam, maybe you can talk about a little bit of the things that the school is able to do to ensure, that the school is safe and that the student is safely reintegrated into school if they're part of a threat assessment.
So part of the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Act is for all school personnel, all those involved with students to get some kind of training on mental health, first aid training, so that we can all see the warning signs and be a preventive layer to notice students that are withdrawing, excessive absences, a history of school violence, experience some kind of traumatic event. And we monitor those concerns, whether it comes from the community, whether it comes from peers, whether it comes from parents, teachers, staff. Social workers are constantly monitoring these concerns in different areas. Some of the interventions we're doing is sometimes we do have to provide one-on-one therapy, therapeutic interventions. Sometimes it's a family intervention. Students have needs. Some of those needs come from family situations and family issues. And so we're getting involved in that as well. When it comes to the behavioral threat assessment, so it can be one related to school violence, some kind of threat, but most recently we've seen an uptake in threat assessments involving students with mental health needs, either wanting to hurt themselves or hurt someone else. And so in those assessments, we also involve the SRO, and some do need to be Baker acted, but most students need some kind of emotional therapeutic strategies. And we provide those strategies at school and in the home through other community providers as well. One key element is getting the parents involved and engaged. And sometimes we do have to reach out to the school resource officer to collaborate on just letting the parents know that it is a team effort and that is not someone isolating or picking on their child, but we're collaborating as a team to strengthen the student's success and guidance and support.
Thank you, Dr. Adam. Real quickly, we've mentioned Baker Act, I think at least twice during this presentation already. For those that aren't familiar, can you explain what a Baker Act is?
So a Baker Act, simply in Florida, a Baker Act is a 72-hour hold, involuntary hold for mental health treatment and or assessment. And that can be done by a licensed mental health professional or an officer.
And that's for when somebody is a danger to themselves or somebody else?
Correct.
Okay. Officer Bostic, how often are you having to participate in these behavioral threat assessments at your school?
Well, since the start of school, I've been involved in like 5. But out of those 5, was that
The start of this school year?
yes.
Okay.
Yes, but out of those 5, only 2 was threats. We've had one for weapons. We're doing it for weapons now, and the only way to get rid of, to help prevent a lot of these BTAs is to get rid of social media.
Yeah.
Because a lot of that stuff is deriving from kids having altercations here at schools, saying the wrong things, not meaning them. And that's majority of what we're dealing with at my school. All right, kids just saying stupid stuff when it comes down to doing the BTA with them. Oh, I was upset. I didn't mean it that way, blah, blah, blah. But the fact of the matter is that you said it and someone heard you said it. So now we have to do the BTA. But there's, at this point, I guess by us having a conversation with them, by doing the BTA, the BTA asks them the question the similar question over and over again to try and get to the point of why they said or did what they did. And for me, is that hopefully when we do the BTA with the kids, that they're telling us the truth, which a lot of times I've learned in high school that one kid tell you one thing, then they'll go and do it next. So while you're sitting down having the interview with them, if they're telling the truth and genuine about what's going on with them, then we can continue to help monitor them to help them later on. Because like I said, by us knowing that they're part of a problem right now, we try and keep our eye on them and make sure that they don't go back on what they said from the start. So like I said, it's hard to prevent it. And like I said, my thing is just continue to educate the kids about things they're saying, things that they're posting on social media, and just try to get them to understand that what you're saying now can hurt you or harm you later.
Yeah, and you've mentioned social media. We're going to get to the challenges that you all are facing in your careers here shortly, and I'm sure that'll be a hot topic. Real quickly, Officer Burton, I know Officer Bostic said he's done 5. About how many threat assessments have you been a part of this year?
Probably about the same number.
So, Dr. Adam, I mean, that may not sound like a lot to the layperson, but maybe you can explain for the group, like, how long of a process is that now all of this staff is now taken offline and they're not dealing with the masses and they're focused on this one individual situation or person?
Yes. So depending on the level of threat and the information that we have to work with, behavior threat assessments can last, I would say, 30 minutes to 2 hours and a half, depending on the severity level, the information, witness statements, how many parties are involved, how long this been manifesting till it surfaced. So it can be as light as I made a bad post, my girlfriend made me mad, or yes, this has been brewing. I have texts, my friend has texts, my mom knows. And so it's a very involved process, especially if it involves more than one student. And typically it kind of involves more than one student. So that's multiple interviews, multiple staff and teams needed. And some schools, you only have one school social worker, one SRO, now, but there's multiple interviews happening. Sometimes I'm sure the officers have faced that there's more than one SRO, there's more than one BTA in a day. And so, but there's other typical school activities happening at the same time. So it's a very involved and engaged process. And it's not really streamlined. Each case is different, and I'm sure officers are used to that. Each case is different. Each team can be different as well. The key staples, which is an important part of the relationship between the SRO and the school social worker, is usually the school social worker and the SRO are the main key personnel there, but various assistant principals, guidance counselors, students, and other support parties as well.
Well, with that much time spent for one threat assessment, you could be tied up for a quarter of your day. And I know some of these campuses are large. Officer Bostic, you've got over 2,000 students at your school?
Yes.
Same with you, Officer Burton?
Yeah, we're a little closer to 3,000.
We are too. We're like about 27.
It's a lot of students and a lot of problems. And I can see where this is a big challenge for you all, which is a great segue to the next part of our topic or conversation we want to have. I'd like to discuss some of the challenges you all are facing in your environment. I'd like to start with Officer Bostic. What are some of the challenges? And I know I'm giving you this question first specifically because I know your school and I know some of the issues you're dealing with. You're in a more underserved area. So what are some of the challenges that you're facing with with your student issues at your school?
Well, right now, the biggest challenge I have in my school is probably the vaping.
Vaping?
Vaping, yes. Smoking, vaping, that type of stuff. Like I said, kids are being caught with it every day. 5 to 6 times a day, kids are being caught with vaping in bathrooms, in around the corner, every corner of the school, their kid have a vape pen. So that's one of our biggest problems. Also, fighting's been an issue with the kids. Like I said, I've been in the school for the past 4 years and never seen a bunch of kids amongst kids start a lot of riffraff between friends amongst friends.
So you're saying this fighting problem's getting worse?
This year it hasn't been that bad yet, but previous years it's been bad, and it comes with kids clicking in groups together, fighting a set of kids from this side of town, that side of town. So it has been really bad, but like I say, this is the start of the year, so I don't want to jinx myself. But I hate to say this, and I know there's probably some school board employees listening to me right now, but until we change the school board matrix, we are going to continue to have these issues at school. There's a lot of problems.
When you mention the matrix, you're talking about the discipline matrix, meaning if a student does X, the punishment is Y.
Right.
Okay.
Right. For example, when I first got there, a kid with a taser was expelled. Now they're suspended for a couple of days. So it's like they're like being more lenient when the possibilities of something happening at the school, if we don't put a stop to it, then it's going to continue to get worse. Put it like this, there's nothing going to change about the culture of the school if the matrix don't change.
Yeah, and I know, Officer Burton, you experienced this over the last couple of years. Your school was in the news for some fights, and these fights were live streamed on social media. Can you talk briefly about the influence? I know Officer Bostic had mentioned it earlier about the influence of social media on these kids and some of the issues you're facing with that.
Sure. The majority of the fighting on my campus does stem from social media. If we eliminated social media, a lot of our problems would maybe be lessened. I wouldn't say totally go away, but they'd be lessened. And when the kids talk about social media and they threaten somebody, sometimes they're serious and other times they say, oh, I was just joking. So when I educate my students about, social media behavior, I'm like, look, guys, I understand that there's a delete button, but realistically, that message you just sent never goes away. Either the person you sent it to screenshot it, or the social media platform will, work along with law enforcement if a crime was involved. But yeah, Coral Glades, some of my problems are fighting. I would say mental illness comes next. Thirdly, probably sexual issues. And then fourth, I'd say theft.
Theft on school property, things taken out of lockers and such.
Yeah, cell phones, bikes, not so much money or anything, but mostly material things get stolen from the school.
Yeah. Dr. Adam, from the social work perspective, what are the challenges that you're facing dealing with students today?
First, I would say post-COVID, that COVID is a pandemic, a traumatic event. So we're definitely seeing more families dealing with the loss, with trauma related to loss, poverty, mental health issues, just lack of overall resources, access to resources, just basic family needs. And when families don't have the basic needs, then students have they lack the foundation to properly come to school and be engaged in learning. And so that's one of the key things we've been seeing. Just parent fear of labeling, whether it has to do with maybe a student have an education need or a mental health need. Just parents understanding that that the school is here to provide a support, and we are invested in the family and the student. And so, but there's so much stigma when it comes to mental health needs or even education needs. So we're still seeing that. And also we do have to explain when SROs get involved, it's usually the social worker explaining to the parents, you know, the role of the SRO and why we're collaborating as a team. So those challenges we still face. And of course, yes, social media is definitely a big issue. But for some, social media is also brings awareness to some problems and issues we may not know that's festering. So it's also helped become eyes and ears also for school staff and families.
Yeah, there is some benefit there certainly as well. Dr. Adam, you mentioned in your answer there about dealing with mental health issues. What are the mental health issues you're seeing today in students, and would you say that's on the rise, stable, or decreasing?
So according to the CDC and also my own experience as working with students, we're seeing an increase in anxiety and depression, lack of self-esteem, lack of motivation. Going back to what Officer Bostic was saying about substance use, we're definitely seeing a big increase in vaping, marijuana use. And this month, September, is Suicide Prevention and Awareness Month. But one of the things that very, very concerning is we're seeing an increase in suicidal thoughts and plans in adolescents. And that's across the US, not only in Florida. We're also seeing an increase in behavioral issues and peer relationship issues as well. And also violence among family. Violence among families spills into the school system as well.
Probably a good time for you to then maybe talk about some of the warning signs or risk factors for people to keep an eye out for if they're seeing, you know, their child's behavior or peers or students' behavior changing.
So definitely as a community, we need to pay close attention to the substance use and abuse, excessive absences, school social workers. That's like one of the primary things we're key on is school absences is definitely a warning sign. Looking for students that's withdrawing from friends and activities. So they're falling out with everyone, staff, friends, family, students that make threats, openly make threats, whether they're founded or unfounded, and whether they've had a recent traumatic events. Many students who've had some kind of recent traumatic event happen in their life, they tend to spiral without proper support and supervision.
Yeah, I can see that happening. So let's change gears here just for a little bit. We haven't heard much from Sergeant Kaplis, and I know during your introduction, Billy, you gave some examples of some of the community outreach that the Coral Springs Police Department is doing. And I know that a lot of the agencies in the area have tremendous outreach programs. One of the foundations of community-oriented policing, in which I think there's a large request for, is the partnerships. Can you talk a little bit about some of the partnerships that you've engaged in with the community that have helped to support your summer youth camp, your chess club, and the other programming?
Sorry, I was muted. One of the biggest partners of ours is the school board for the use of facilities, as well as the social workers are the one who share the information of the kids most in need in our community if we're not seeing it on a daily basis, so they can refer us or direct us. One of the hurdles we have is the amount of students in our city that are attending schools in our city that don't live here. So it's difficult to follow up on when it's not in our jurisdiction. One of the entities that have come to our city is the Jack Brewer Foundation. They opened up a service institute, which is a facility in our northeast area of our community that provides meals as well as tutoring. They brought in Propel, which is people reach out to provide leadership. It's a business out of Boca Raton that provides teachers that are actually at the facility on a daily basis to assist our elementary, middle, and high school kids who are willing to come to the school to be tutored, get educational assistance, as well as receive a meal and be fed.
Excellent. You also mentioned at your youth summer camp that the kids leave with backpacks and uniforms for the school year. Where do those come from?
We have the partners through our clergy coalition and clergy groups as well. We have some generous businesses like FiServe that also donate funds that allows us to purchase that. The clergy group has provided the backpacks now, I believe, for 3 years. In particular, it was Park Ridge Baptist. And one of the other things I forgot to mention is all our staff at the camp is either an SRO officer or it is a high school volunteer where they're also earning their hours. So our camp is pretty much kindergarten all the way up to college that we're assisting the kids.
At your youth summer camp, and I don't know if you mentioned this during your introduction, don't you also have some medical folks come to give some evaluation to some of these students who may have never seen a doctor before?
We've had some mental health training. Just this year was our first year doing it. They were provided with children's books to better explain things, and if there were issues to discuss them with adults or somebody of authority. Mm-hmm. And we do other health things, like as I mentioned, the vision checkups, glasses, or they get eye checkups, and if they need glasses, we provide the glasses through I believe it's hiking.
So it's wonderful, fabulous work you guys are doing with the community, and obviously working with you hand in hand. One of the things that I had asked you to evaluate before I retired was, what's the success been? What's been the results? So can you talk a little bit to that, the impact that you've had?
Each year we average just below 100 kids, but a lot of these kids come back year after year. One of the things that we've seen in the past 3 years is we've had campers come back and actually volunteer at the camp to assist. We also did, it was probably about 508 kids had gone through the camp up until this year. And of those, only 4 had contact with law enforcement. Only 1 of them was negative. So I see that as a great undertaking and a great result.
All goes to the collaborative mentoring relationship between the schools and the social workers in our community. It's fabulous work. Thank you, Billy. Let's talk a little bit about some of the things that peers, family, parents can take to help out their students who may be struggling, or whether that's with behavior or academics. Officer Burton, what are some of the specific action steps parents can take, to get involved or more involved with their students?
Sure. Well, most of the parents that I, meet, I would say the majority of them want to see their child's behaviors or issues corrected. There are a few parents who like to put the blame on the school, the teachers, the police officer. We're not doing anything. So I get a little bit of that. But when I do have a parent who needs help or wants help, I get the guidance counselor involved. Whether it's, hey, let's get you some help with your academics. There may be some things going on at home. My mom and dad are putting too much stress on me about my schoolwork. I'll bring in the social worker or the guidance counselor for some help to provide some resources, to get that going. It is tough when I do have a parent who does come into my office and passes the blame on other people, and we're trying to tell that parent, hey, look, your son or daughter has this GPA which isn't very good, or their attendance is low, and sometimes the parents just don't want to hear it. We still try to help them, but sometimes it just comes to a point where you're like, Okay, mom or dad, we've given you all the resources. We're sorry, but now, it's up to you. So
what I hear you saying is parent involvement is, key. I know Officer Bostic and I had this conversation offline. Officer Bostic, what's it like in your school when it comes time to reaching out to the parents? You finding that to be a challenge or a good support mechanism for the students?
Well, a lot of parents that I deal with, some tends to have the issue of getting information. Like I said, I don't know if they're computer illiterate or don't check the emails or even have the email or whatever. But when the school says one thing, then the parent come in, well, you didn't notify me, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. Then the school has done their due diligence of getting them the information about the kids not coming to school, the kids' grades of real low or whatever. So, like I said, I don't know if there's another means of mailing the parents something to the house or whatever, but to me, that'll help the parents who don't have access to check emails every morning or have a phone number that's down at the school that's not the right number, a cell phone, whatever, to get the right information so they can help the kids. And then that, like I said, then that'll stop some of the finger pointing about I didn't get this and I didn't get that. So I don't, like I said, I don't know for sure. I'm just, just going off of what I hear and have to deal with every day. Because some of my parents they're real upset about not knowing that my kids missed this many days, not knowing that my kids are safe.
It's interesting that you're having a challenge, getting the information in this technology age to the parents. So, Dr. Adam, I'd like to, from a school social work standpoint, what are some of the things that parents can do to, be involved, or anybody really be involved with the success of our youth?
So one of the things research shows is that parent involvement is key to the student's success. So caregivers being involved and connected, communicating with staff, with teachers constantly, and with their student. Sometimes adults just like to speak to adults, but speak to your children with the youth in your life. Find out what's going on in their daily life. One of the key responsibilities that school social workers do are home visits. If a student is absent, we cannot reach parent by email, phone, we're doing a home visit. We're going out to that home. We're doing our due diligence or getting other community providers involved in order to engage that family. So parents have those resources to help support them. So parent involvement is key. Community involvement, going back to what Officer Kaplis was saying about becoming a mentor or just volunteering in the community. That's important. Mental health firstaid.org has opportunity for anyone in a community to become a mental health first aid first aid trainer. And so that training helps you to become, just like we give first aid for health issues. It trains you to look at warning signs and to be some support for youth in the community. And it's important that we take care of our own selves and emotional well-being, because as just being in the community, in order to spread kindness, we have to be kind to ourselves first.
Maybe you could put the website in the chat for those that are here taking advantage of today's conversation. Sergeant Kaplis, what can we as community members do to help support our students? I know you run all these programming, so you've probably got all kinds of needs.
I think the doctor was dead on, being the volunteering, whether it be as a coach, as a tutor, especially post-COVID. A lot of the educational levels have dropped drastically amongst our elementary school students. I see it on a daily basis when I'm at the Service Institute. Sponsor a child in a sports league. A lot of time these kids don't have opportunities to it's not to, there's scholarships out there to get them in the league. It's the transportation to the fields that are difficult for them, with parents having multiple jobs or single parent household where there's no availability to get the kids to the fields. Sort of like a big brother, big sister program where those opportunities are. I've tried to work with the city to have buses drive through to bring the kids, but it's just too difficult to bring these kids to the field and have them all on the same team, as opposed to they're broken up and put out with 10 different coaches throughout the fields. So to be able to sponsor a kid like that in a sports league, just to get away from the education is big in my mind.
Excellent. All, great ideas. So just to kind of bring this all full circle, listening to everything that everybody said, kind of my key takeaways. Parent engagement is key to student success. Social media awareness, incredibly important, not only for the students to think about what they're posting before they post, but if you're a parent or somebody on this call who's got younger brothers or sisters, make sure you're monitoring their social media to the best of your ability. Youth community and civic engagement is key to successful life. It's not enough to just go to school and get your grades. You've got to be involved. You've got to be somebody that gives back. I think sports leagues and mentorship programs are all great ways for kids to spend their time outside of the school environment. Youth need a consistent, significant adult presence in their life to be successful. If they're raised by their peers or they're raised by social media or the movies, we've probably lost in that regard. And that probably one of the most profound things that I got out of this conversation today is that all schools should be taking this multidisciplinary collaborative approach to assessing students' well-being. You heard today in great detail from Dr. Adam and Officer Bostic and Officer Burton about how much they're engaging to evaluate what is going on in these students' lives each day to make sure they're safe and the school environments are safe. That's it's tremendous work you all are doing for our community. So I really appreciate that. We're about getting ready to start fielding the questions from the group, but before we jump into the question and answer session, we're going to ask you all to complete a brief and really important survey about what we talked about today. The survey was mentioned by Dr. Osei in the beginning. Professor Rubin is going to add the survey link to the chat box now. It only takes a minute, so if you could, please go ahead and fill that out, and we're going to take about 2 minutes, and then we'll jump into the questions. We'll give it another minute, and then as we look at the questions, I'll try and figure out the best panelist to answer those questions. And somebody posted and said the link was not adequate. The correct link has been posted for those that were having issues seeing it. Once you're done with your survey, if you've been intently listening and haven't had an opportunity to post a question, feel free to go ahead and do that. I don't think we've got that many posted at this particular juncture. right, so we're going to jump into the questions. The first question was, do you think that increasing the social work and police amount of staff in each school would also improve the school environment or circumstances? One officer and one social worker per 2,000 to 3,000 kids seems inadequate. I'm going to have two people answer this question. I'm going to start with Sergeant Kaplis. Since he supervised the unit, he's familiar with the contracts and the finances that are involved.
In particular, right now, we are trying to have at least 2 officers in each high school due to the size. They're all at about 3,000. Tim and JB, you guys can confirm that. I'm not sure what your population is last checked. It was right hovering around that number. And the staff additionally for the security monitors, the security staff, I know a lot of those positions are open, vacant, and still unfilled. And if they had those to full capacity, I know it would help immensely.
Yeah, and I can speak to, I have some knowledge of the contract and costs. When you hire or put another officer in the school, you're looking at not just the salary, but also the benefits that go with that. And the cost is around $120,000 a year for each individual employee. And in this particular county, the school board only reimburses roughly half that cost to the agencies that provide the school resource officers. So financially, it's a bit of a challenge. But I'm not that familiar with the circumstances and numbers of school social workers. So I was hoping Dr. Adam could speak to that.
So some schools, such as elementary schools, there's maybe one social worker for every 3 schools. Most middle schools have a school social worker. That is the goal. And most high schools have 1 social worker. The research shows that we definitely need more school social workers because there's multiple hats, multiple interventions that need to be provided on a daily basis. And multiple issues. So 1 social worker for every 3,000, that's a lot. If you have multiple schools, that's definitely a gap in resources that students and families could have. So increasing the number of school social workers would be a great thing. There's research and data to prove that. Now, financially, we just need to vote and support those resources.
Yeah, I would imagine with salary and benefits, and I think Broward County, I can't speak to Palm Beach, Broward County has over 230 public schools. So you're talking about adding several hundred employees. You're probably looking at a few $1 million a year to add more social workers. The next question, and I don't want to call anybody out for who posted it, but I'm not sure I'm understanding the question. How family are school resource officers with the positive behavior instructional supports framework? If you posted that question, maybe you can, I think there's maybe a typo there. Can maybe reframe that for me. Next question. How did each of you learn about your careers and why did you choose them? What do you feel is the most positive tactic you've seen that helps to prevent disorderly conduct in the community? Dr. Adam, I'll start with you on that.
So I started in the field, not as a school social worker, but working, having the roles and responsibilities of a school social worker and a school therapist. Has taught me a lot about adolescence. Adolescents keep you on your toes. It keeps it very interesting all the time. And so being a school social worker was and having a positive impact on you was a very important aspect for me. And I think just working with families and understanding that teachers can't do it all. We haven't really talked a lot about that today, but having a team, having the collaborations make a difference in the classroom. And so part of my motivation of working with schools is definitely being a support and resource to the teachers and the staff at the schools as well.
Great. Sergeant Kaplan.
I started off as a probation and parole officer, and then I moved over to law enforcement, where I happily spent this career over the last 20 plus years, and just always wanted to be able to help. In dealing with people, it's a simple philosophy of give respect to get respect, and it's worked out well for me.
Thanks, Billy. Officer Bostic.
Well, I always work with kids, coach Little League football, and once I had the opportunity to go into high school, I wanted to get back into working with the juveniles again, by coaching football again. That was my biggest thing, is trying to get there, and hopefully I continue to try and talk to motivate kids to continue to go to school, get good grades, and trying to be a positive model about helping them trying to get to college, tell them about the importance of it, and just trying to be there for the kids.
All right. Thanks, James. Officer Burton.
I'll come out and say it for JB and I. We're both former professional athletes, and mentoring and coaching, I know, is very important to both of us as far as leading the kids in the right direction. I came out of professional sports, was actually a Coral Springs Police Department captain who was very influential in my life growing up as a youth. And I told him I had a degree from FAU in criminal justice. And he told me the Coral Springs Police Department was hiring, and he helped me through the process. And here I am 16 years later. So.
Excellent. Thank you for the FAU criminal justice plug. We appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Okay. The next question is, what would you say is the hardest aspect of being an SRO? Officer Bostic, real quick, what would you say is the hardest aspect?
Well, the hardest aspect of being an SRO, it has got a lot easier for me. Coming from road patrol, doing other things at the police department, and coming to a community whereas it already has rules and regulations there, seeing some things that I can't do anything about, I'll have to allow the school to deal with that. Like I say, with the Promise program and that type of stuff, and just sitting back and watching students doing things that can eventually hurt them later on in life, not understanding the nature of their actions and not really being able to do anything but talk with them. And then there's the kids at the school who don't want to hear anything from a police officer. I guess it's in their nature and their mindset that we are all the bad guys. So my thing is that I always treat them with kindness. Every day I speak to ones that seems to be kind of means toward me, whatever. I still speak to them every day, still try to get across to them, whatever, to let them know that, look, we're not, the police officers are here to help you. We're not here to do anything to you, but we're here for you.
Okay, I appreciate that, gentlemen. Having worked with you all firsthand, I know that you're incredibly dedicated to your schools and your community, so I do appreciate that. Next question, how familiar are the school resource officers with the positive behavioral instructional supports, specifically the framework for teaching behavioral expectations rather than a traditional model of discipline? I'm going to have Dr. Adam take this question for us.
I think Officer Kapelis spoke to this question. So it's really the school resource officers and their prevention programs are really the aspect that is used to support positive behaviors, the anti-bullying campaigns, the think before you text campaigns, the no vaping campaigns. When the school resource officers are involved in the gang prevention campaigns. When we have the school resource involved in those aspects and working with the guidance counselors more specifically for those positive behavior instructional supports, that really strengthens the schools. A lot of that is really emphasized in elementary, but we do recommend that those interventions are phased from 0 to high school as well, because they've been found to be useful for all ages.
Excellent. Thank you. I appreciate that. I got another question here. Why? The question is about private schools and why they seem to have less or no issues with student behavior.
I went to a private school. Maybe I can.
That's right, you did, and I know what school you went to. So go ahead, Timmy. Why don't you-
Yes. So as a product of St. Thomas Aquinas, I know one of the major things that keeps the discipline to a low is the fear of getting kicked out of the school. You're going to a school where your mom and dad are paying, some very expensive money, and the last thing you want to do is disappoint them by, them getting a phone call saying, your son or daughter fought in school today. Unfortunately, we're going to have to, kick them out of school. So that puts a lot of, for me, that would put a lot of fear, to have to go through that. So I think that's one of the things that, where you see the difference between public and private is the fear of getting kicked out. In public school, you get into a fight, you get a 5-day vacation, you get to do your work at home, and then you get to come back. Well, there's really no penalty in that. So.
From the mental health, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Dr. Adam,
From
please.
the mental health aspect, I would say that we don't see that. We don't see that change. Mental health issues are across the board, whether it's public or private school. And so the concerns are the same. Social media is an issue. When we see depression, anxiety, those mental health challenges are still the same across school systems.
Sergeant Kaplis, I know you're very involved at the Coral Springs Charter School, and I think we'd be doing a disservice if we didn't talk about the charter schools in this behavioral issue, because they're probably more akin to the private school environment.
It's definitely is, because it's a privilege, not a right to attend. It has consequences that, like Tim said, is if you aren't behaving as they want, you can continue your education elsewhere. As I believe earlier in the conversation, we had mentioned somebody being expelled from school, where I've only seen things done where they just get reassigned to another school. I've never seen an expulsion by means of you're at home doing homeschooling for the rest of your career. You're just moved to another school. So consequences would be the difference, plain and simple.
All right, I've got a social media question here. Understanding that we'd like to discourage people from posting things that they don't mean on social media, and that can cause unnecessary obligations on our limited resources, because as you all have spoken to, we have to respond when we see these things or they're brought to our attention. Can we talk about maybe how social media can be used as an effective tool for seeing red flags for real threats and concerns? Maybe Dr. Adam can take that one. You're muted, sorry.
So when we see red flags, students are concerned about their safety as well, and so is staff. So one thing is students are the eyes. And so when they see something, we definitely support, see something, say something. And students are, they will contact, they will use the text line, email the teacher, screenshots of what they've seen, no matter the time of day. So students, I think that campaign of us educating, like, it's not only the safety of the staff in the school building, but it's your safety as well. And so they're taking ownership of that. And so social media, them seeing their peers change, maybe they have a concern and saying, hey, disengaged with everyone online. They blocked everyone, or they've made a threat online. And so social media, some believe, is their private circle, but but those peers are also a resource to our school resource officers and security staff to engage them in looking for those warning signs as well.
Thank you, Dr. Adam. I appreciate the response there. We've talked about the social media and the issues that's causing today. So we've hit 7:15, and we just got one last question that popped up. How long usually is the process for providing help for a student? That's probably going to be dependent on the circumstances, but I think Dr. Adam, again, you're probably the best person to answer this question right now.
I think it depends on the need. We take a systemic approach. So it's not only looking at what's going on with the student at school, but also what's going on with them in the community and at home. So it just depends on the need of the student. Some students receive services from when they start kindergarten until they graduate. And so the school systems are set up to provide those supports. The community needs to be involved in engaging and supporting those resources as well. But it's and needs change. Maybe a student could have an academic need last school year, and this school year they have more of a social emotional need. So students needs changes as well. So the length of time, it just depends on the student.
So it can be very situational. I'm assuming for Officer Bostic and Officer Burton, if they're involved with following up with a student, they don't really put time constraints on how long they're going to stay involved for. Is that correct, gentlemen?
What they're having us do lately now is if we Baker Act a student, we are following up with that student probably 1 week later. We are re-engaging with the student, asking them how the experience was, how they're feeling now. Most of the time the feedback is very positive, but I have had a few students where they're like, I didn't like being there. I didn't like the process. So, but we do follow up.
And they have a monitoring plan as well. And so that monitoring plan could be 3, 6 months, or the entire school year, if it's in relation to a behavior threat assessment. And so the social workers, the guidance counselors are involved in making those monthly or weekly contacts, depending on what the monitoring plan calls for.
Yeah, I know that the wraparound services that you all provide are extensive, and you really don't want to put a time limit on it because you don't know how long it's going to take to stay engaged and get the child engaged in pro-social behavior and school success in school. So right now we've run a little bit past 7:15, which was our time. So we're going to go ahead and start to look and wind this down. I want to thank our amazing panelists taking time out of their day, their schedule, away from their families, to share their experiences with the group here at Florida Atlantic University. We appreciate your expertise. I did also appreciate spending some time with some old friends. So personally, I'm honored and honored to have been asked to moderate this, and really appreciate the time. To everyone who joined us, thank you for being here. If you'd like to watch or share the recording of tonight's conversation, you can find it on our college YouTube channel, which Professor Rubin is posting to the chat right now, along with some links where you can go to find some more information. Recommend that you copy and paste her message if you would like to save it, and it will also be added to the video description on YouTube. We hope to see everyone back in the spring for another insightful community conversation. So stay tuned for those details of the coming months. Thanks again for joining us, and have a great rest of your night. And if you're in my crime analysis class, we'll be switching over to Zoom here shortly. Have a great night, everybody.